This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, pussy symbolism and the masked hatred of the Women's March. Our guest this evening, Dawn Perlmutter. She's the director of the Symbol Intelligence Group and a leading expert in symbols, symbolic methodologies, unfamiliar customs, and ritualistic crimes. Dawn, what an honor to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And we were just talking before the show about how we're going to deal with this issue because, you know, as you've written about, there was this leftist women's march and, you know, they came out in droves and it included their quote-unquote pussy demonstrations and posters and everything. And it's left me in a position as a host as to what terms to use and how to conduct myself with an interview such as this. But let's start with that. What do you think, Dawn? How did we arrive here?
Well, the protest, the Women's March on Washington, right the day after the inauguration, there were a lot of news reports that were saying that there were vulgarities, but nobody was actually explaining what they were because everybody was so uncomfortable with it. But basically, I noticed that a lot of the signs, a lot of the protest signs, and a lot of the women were dressed as vaginas. And there was an entire project that the cute pink hats that people may not realize were a project, and they were called pink pussy hats, and supposedly hand knitted. I guess a lot of them were, and that was a project that wanted to take the term pussy and turn it into a symbol of empowerment. So that is their reasoning for all of the symbolism and the signs and the display.
Okay, well, look, to our audience, Dawn has written a fascinating article on this at Front Page Magazine. You can Google it. It's called Pussy Symbolism and the Masked Hatred of the Women's March. And it's at Front Page Magazine. And Dawn, we very much appreciate your the scholarship that you bring and the wisdom that you bring. And so this, on some levels, this is all just so bizarre, but yet it represents very much. Look, it's not just vulgarity and stupidity. This very much represents what the left is about, and in many respects, obviously, its agenda and what they're trying to achieve here. So let's begin with this. In terms of their pussy hats and this, you know, pussy project and all of their signs, they, you know, as your article, you know, showed, you know, they had all these expressions on their signs, get your politics out of my, you know, I'm going to maybe use the P word once in a while here because maybe keep it PG throughout the program. But what's the left's agenda here? I mean, Dawn, as you point out in the article, I thought that feminism was about not objectifying women. I mean, isn't this objectifying women? There's a lot of hypocrisy and double standards here, no?
Yes, definitely. And what I said in the article is that the whole second wave of feminism was to, again, not make women just sexual objects. And I think what's happened here is that it became almost like a branding to get women to come to the march, and in a way to make them feel like, you know, they're shocking or you know, in your face, not really comprehending, or maybe they are comprehending the meaning of it, but to really understand what is happening here. It's so much beyond just feminism. This is really part of a march of women who don't even realize what is going on.
Yeah. Well, one second here, Dawn, because yes, look, we know that there's masses of people everywhere that are just dumb, haven't thought it through, and there's a lot of them that just put on these signs. But obviously, the leadership, the agenda framers behind it know what they're doing, and I would agree with you 100%. This is Marxism. This is class hatred, gender hatred, all kinds of stuff. But look, you point out in your article, they pretend that, oh, you know, the P word, P word, P word, but this is a devolution of women's power, number one. It's also a hatred of men, right?
Absolutely. It's more than a hatred. It's an emasculation of men that's going on. And even worse, they have young children, young girls there watching all of this.
Yeah.
And there's men participating in their own emasculation.
Yeah.
That's how far it's gotten.
You know, sorry to interrupt, but Dawn, you know what's interesting? Why is it so important for leftists to be grotesque, to be vulgar? Like you see Ashley Judd up there, and oh, I'm nasty, and all this stuff she's talking about, and then she has to bring up the blood that's coming out of the P word and all this stuff, right? What is this? What is this urge to be grotesque on the one hand, and then at the same time, where is the concern for the blood that comes out of female genital mutilation under Islam? I mean, if they were really concerned with private parts of a woman, you would think that they would have compassion for the victims of female genital mutilation under Islam, but we never hear about that. I didn't mean to go on a long tirade here, but you go ahead with that.
Well, there's a lot of things they're not talking about. First of all, with Ashley Judd, this harkens back to performance art. This is she may think she's being shocking, but this all went on in the 60s. Almost half the women's movement in the 60s was talking about menstrual blood or getting it out in the open, which at that time, it really was for different reasons. It was to bring it out where it wasn't sort of taboo. Now it's just shock value.
Yeah.
The other things that the women there aren't talking about, other, you know, than honor killing and female genital mutilation that goes on in other countries, they don't even realize that where they're getting their manicures and pedicures, that a large portion of the women doing that are trafficked. They're slaves basically, part of human trafficking, and they don't even pay attention to that. So there is sort of a privileged situation here, which works very well for the leftists to manipulate the situation.
Right. And Dawn, fascinating article you wrote for Front Page. You also point out in there, look, there's a historical context here. There's a historical tradition here. You refer to an article by David Horowitz on V-Day. And we know that these feminists are all about the V-Day, and we can imagine what the V stands for. But the V also stands, you know, for them anyway, it's interconnected with violence and all these things. But, you know, David Horowitz pointed out in his article that this is also really a hatred of men and a hatred of many other things and a lot of self-hate, obviously. But you show that, you know, this tradition is continuing. There's V-Day, and they're talking about the private part with the V word. Now it's the P word. It's just continuing. What's your conclusion on this for us?
Well, if I could just give a quick history, the first wave of feminism, when we go back to the suffragettes, and that was about the vote, where women really were property and had no rights over their children, over their own life. The second wave, which was in the 60s, came shortly after the civil rights movement. That was, again, for the women's liberation movement, for equality, but it was primarily a white woman's movement. And the reason this is important is because we are now in the third wave. And the third wave of feminism is sort of a backlash against the second wave. And the third wave is the Black nationalist women, the Black feminists who were left out of everything. They were treated very badly by the Black nationalist civil rights groups. They weren't even very rarely acknowledged by the women in the second wave. And now this is their time. So Black Lives Matter is really the most successful Black feminist group. They are also a Marxist group, but instead of pitting sort of the bourgeois versus the proletariat, they have turned it into a black versus white. And they are really this is where all this, the women that were there were primarily white upper class women. There were primarily white women who are being made to feel guilty about their identity.
Right.
That's why we have these expressions, check your privilege.
Right.
Your privilege is showing. This is all, now we're in this third wave of feminism where identity politics and Black nationalism and this Marxism is really controlling the feminist movement. And they are leading it in a very scary direction.
Absolutely, Dawn. I'm sorry. I wish we could talk another half an hour, if not another 2 hours and a half. We got 60 seconds left. Overall, this is the left's war on our civilization, on the Judeo-Christian tradition. You've showed this. Look, they're pitting women against men. They're pitting men against manhood, women against femininity, class hatred, race hatred, all of it. Under 60 seconds here, how do we capsulize and synthesize this leftist war on our civilization? And let's sum it up in terms of how they're using the P word as a weapon.
Well, we have to educate women who are participating in these marches with, these costumes, that this is not a joke, that this is very serious. They think they're going to a costume party and that it's a fun day in the park, when this is a really, it's a war. And they don't even realize they're being exploited in it.
Dawn, and you point out in the article, are they going to take this march to Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Iran? I guess not.
They really need to understand how women really are oppressed in other countries and here. If they would just open if they realized what went on, they wouldn't be going and getting manicures by women who are being human trafficked. They have their heads are in the sand. So they're participating in these marches and thinking it's all very cute and fun, when by the time they wake up, it's going to be too late. It's very frightening.
And what's always very interesting is they shout and scream about their oppression, but they always do so on the assumption that they know nothing will happen to them and they can just go home and watch TV and live free lives. Just utter hypocrisy. Dawn Perlmutter, thank you so much for everything you contribute to the truth and to our knowledge of, I would say, the evil of the left. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining the Glazov Gang tonight. If you like this show and like what we do, go to jamieglazov.com to support the show. And if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you are. Good night.